We're gonna call us to order and do the roll, please. Sure.
Ben Chambers,
Second.
Kelly Brown, Tommy Sofranic,
Here.
Rory Stolzenberg,
Here.
Anya Schwarzenbruder, Alberic Carino Plum,
Here.
Lonnie Murray,
Here.
Charles Proctor, Sandy Shackelford, Christine Jacobs, present. Sarah Simba, Jason Espy,
Present.
Bill Palmer,
Here.
Mitch Huber.
Present online.
Online.
Thanks, Mitch. Could you provide a location and a reason for online attendance, please?
Yeah, I'm based in Richmond, Virginia.
Thank you. Wood Hudson, Sarah Pennington, Barry Herring,
Here.
Garland Williams,
Everybody?
yep, we
All right.
do.
So we need to vote Mitch in so he can participate. I think we put a voice vote, right?
Yeah,
We need to do roll call.
you can do a roll call.
I can do voice. Okay. So all in favor of letting Mitch participate remotely, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, Mitch, welcome to the club. Next up, we are gonna do matters from the public. Do I have anybody from the public that's like their leads? Thank you.
Since you don't have a clock, I'm gonna set one for myself to keep myself disciplined. All right, Marks.
Thank you, sir.
So if a bird starts chirping, that's Peter, stop talking. All right. Hey, good morning, MPO Tech and members of the public. I'm Peter Krebs from the Piedmont Environmental Council. I'm here to talk about the Fifth Street I-64 interchange project that you all have been working on for a long time, not just you, but the whole community. It's really one of the highest priorities, if not Albemarle County's top priority. It's way up there on the list. We're trying to solve three problems simultaneously, which is relieving congestion, improving safety, and also increasing connectivity. And I'm going to speak mainly about the connectivity piece of it because this is one of those legacy barriers that has been erected all across America, where a interstate or some major highway severs the community right in half. And when I speak to other advocates, sometimes they get sidetracked about intentionality or negligence or how we got these barriers. And I don't really think it's useful to talk about that, except that it does sort of illuminate where we are at the present. As far as the solutions that I've seen presented, it looks like there are lots of directions. One would be doing a comprehensive project that addresses connectivity, congestion, and safety all at once. This seems to be a bit disfavored right now because of high costs. Another approach would be to just solve the congestion and the safety and leave for future generations the connectivity piece. I would strongly advise you not to do that. This is exactly how we got in this situation. So VDOT recommended some alternative approaches, which I actually favor, but do not leave those as vague future work. And speaking to the third option would be to do the congestion and safety just on the bridge and pursuing alternative routes, for example, Biscuit Run, Morris Creek, as well. And in fact, if those are done by the localities, they might be done quicker. But it's gonna need coordination, and I think the MPO is the perfect body for that. After all, 10 years ago, basically, the MPO started the Fifth Street Pub and Trails project. And the reason why that was the first real bike ped project done is because that's a highly strategic spot. So I would like to, I'll be back to the policy board again, talking about how we're gonna need leadership from the city and the county to really solve this comprehensive net of problems with a comprehensive solution. Thank you.
All right, the other comments? So so next we're gonna move on to general administration. First up is review and acceptance of the agenda, and I get a motion to accept the agenda. Thank you, and all in favor of accepting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, all good to move forward with this. Now we're gonna look at the meeting minutes for October. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve, or do we have any questions or commentary on this? So moved. Second. All right, all in favor of approving the October meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Next up is going to be new business. We're going to start with Smart Scale Round 7 project locations. Sandy's going to take us through this one.
Or do you want me to?
Several, yeah. However, it's easier for you, so.
Morning, everybody.
Morning. Morning.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about the Smart Scale Round 7 projects, and before we get into that, there's a little bit of additional information that that was made a request that we review beforehand, and this will help frame the discussion around how we are as VDOT staff who is trying to support high quality applications that stand a high chance of being successful through Smart Scale. The framework that we are evaluating these projects under, and give you a little glimpse into maybe the assessment process that we're going through as we work through these projects. There's a lot of information to go through. I'm happy to answer questions, but I'll try to keep it pretty high level at this point. So the first thing that is really important to start thinking about is what type of priority a project aligns with. So this table is not necessarily completely comprehensive. It's a best effort, but it starts showing how you can start thinking about which type of priority a project is based on what kinds of projects the funding programs are intended to support. Smart Scale supports the top two projects that are on the table, the high priority project program and the district grant program. These are intended to fund projects that are identified as priorities through the statewide transportation process. So the high priority project program is intended to fund projects on corridors of statewide significance or regional networks, projects that will have a significant regional impact, they're competitive statewide. And then the district grant program is intended to fund priorities that are that have that benefit to cost ratio within the different VDOT construction districts. So these are more local priorities in nature, but the way the prioritization is determined is still assessed by the statewide transportation plan. So that's kind of the first screening. For projects that might be high regional or local priorities that don't necessarily fit well within the Smart Scale buckets, there are a number of other programs that can be considered. The federal discretionary grants, just listing a few here, there's Build or Raise, there's Safe Streets and Roads for All, there's Reconnecting Communities. Folks in this room have more experience with some of these than VDOT does. These are not within VDOT purview. These are federal grants. The MPOs applied, localities have applied for these. But that would be the first step in determining if there's a more impactful project that doesn't fit well within Smart Scale. Is there a federal discretionary grant? There are challenges with federal discretionary grants. It's dependent upon continued federal funding. There are different match requirements that vary by the specific program, and they can be really highly competitive. But there are additional funding that could be pursued to get into the community to support some of these projects outside of Smart Scale.
That's a quick question. So there may be some of these federal discretionary grants that we'd be interested in going after that may come out of a project that is a VDOT study.
Mm-hmm.
How far does VDOT support that?
Yeah, I mean,
application development for something that's not a VDOT application, Smart Scale.
I think to the extent, so for example, with the Ravenna River Bicycle and Pedestrian Bridge, VDOT was very happy to partner with the TJPDC to provide the administrative support, enter into a contract. You know, we want, if it comes, especially if it comes out of a VDOT study, that's a win for everybody, right? If we can get additional investment into it. So if there's an opportunity to move that project forward, you know, I don't have the final say, but I think as long as it's practical, as long as it makes sense, VDOT has historically been very willing to support those projects.
I sort of the follow-up question to that is, you're looking at stars or pipeline. A lot of times we're talking about design questions, and we're really designing around what's the Smart Scale way of us getting money. If we've identified that, you know, a stars project or a pipeline project might be better for safe streets for all, or might be better for build, does that change the discussion that we're having about the design choices that we're making for that project?
It could. I think potentially it could. I think that's an important discussion to have as part of that process we go through. Because you're right, you know, depending on what we imagine the source is, that determines what benefits we're trying to achieve through the project. It would be really important to document that as part of the planning study, though. Any other questions on that? Okay. For projects that are local priorities, the main way that these get funded, aside from Smart Scale, is through revenue sharing. There aren't a lot of criteria as far as the way a project is scored. The most important criteria is that the locality has identified it as a priority and are willing to commit a 50% match. There are limitations on the amount of funding that's available. So $10 million state match per project is the limit, matched by an additional $10 million for a locality. So you can have a project up to $20 million. And then each round, each locality is only eligible to receive $10 million. And that's a biennial round. It's the off year from Smart Scale. So if there's a project that's a high local priority that doesn't fit well in Smart Scale and it's within those other parameters, revenue sharing is the option to pursue those projects.
So revenue sharing is competitive though, right? Criteria or things in value.
It's not a benefit cost ratio. It's based on the type of project. So basically projects that have received previous funding get funded in full first. And then the next round is that projects that are either VTrans priority or are in a locality's capital improvement program get funded. And then it goes down the list. So those are the first two tiers.
Right.
What typically happens is that a project isn't funded in full the first round. But once you start receiving funding through revenue sharing, you'll be a higher priority for the following rounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then there are some of these other programs that maybe aren't used as regularly, but still do provide additional opportunities for to fund local projects if they align well with the program guidelines, like transportation alternatives, federal lands access program, et cetera.
With revenue sharing, it says localities. Do you have any examples of where maybe an MPO has helped organize locality working together to go after revenue sharing?
So I don't think an MPO can be the direct applicant, but they can certainly support the project. One thing that's really interesting about revenue sharing is that a locality can apply for a project in a different locality as long as there's support. That is explicitly stated that is not allowed in Smart Scale. So that gives a little bit more flexibility as well.
Not allowed in Smart Scale.
Wait, so we could, Albemarle could apply for a project in Nelson as long as Nelson supported the project? Interesting.
Yeah, that we're building this around Greenway.
Okay. Yeah, in Smart Scale, at least a portion of the project has to be within the jurisdiction to apply.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gross.
Okay. So this is kind of the first consideration is consider like which bucket your project falls under. If it's a high priority identified through VTrans, smart scale is a good option. If it doesn't align well with V-Trans and with the smart scale program, maybe start looking down the list to see if there's another program that would fit better. The second thing is that in addition to sort of what bucket the project falls into, we try to use what we know about the Smart Scale program and how Smart Scale evaluates benefits to determine the likelihood that a project is going to receive benefits. And I think, you know, a lot of us have like an intuitive sense of like this project is going to improve safety or this project is going to improve accessibility, something like that. But it starts becoming really important to see what the actual Smart Scale score is going to be. So for example, for a safety score, a project will only receive a safety score based on the history of documented crashes at that location over the previous 5 years. So while there could be a project that improves safety, if there's not a documented history of the types of crashes that the project is intended to improve, then that safety score isn't going to be very high, even if intrinsically or intuitively we understand that it will make things safer for the region. And so these are just some notes about how what Smart Scale considers as scores for a lot of these different categories. Congestion mitigation is important because it uses a combination of the peak hour traffic volumes at an intersection or along a road segment. And it creates a multiplier that's based on population density. So depending on what the population density is within your census block, there's a multiplier that's assigned. That multiplier is multiplied by the peak hour volume along the road or at the intersection. And that gives you your estimated person throughput measure for the additional throughput you'll get as part of a bicycle or pedestrian improvement. That is important because that factor ends up getting used for the accessibility and for the environmental quality measures as well. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're determining what the congestion mitigation, accessibility, and environmental quality benefits are going to be. And then the last thing I want to mention is just the changes in the land use score from being converted from a standalone factor to a multiplier in round 6, and how that has really impacted the importance of getting scores in safety, congestion mitigation, and accessibility. This chart was my best attempt to look at all of the projects that were funded within the MPO area that were principal bicycle and pedestrian improvement projects. And it looked at what percentage of the score came from the land use factor as part of the original score, and then how that score would have changed once land use was converted to a multiplier. So this doesn't account for any of the other changes in project scoring from land use from round to round. It just shows how the projects that got 80% plus of their score from land use, the scores declined significantly once land use was converted to a multiplier. But the projects that had about 50% of their score from land use still did really well because they were getting scores in other factor areas. So it's really important to understand that you need to get those scores in safety, accessibility, congestion mitigation, and then the land use helps bump those scores up even higher. Any questions about this before we get into the projects specifically? All right, so what we wanted to do was look at the list of projects throughout the entire MPO area, and I think the MPO is going to facilitate a discussion after this about moving forward on recommending projects for the MPO to pursue for round 7. This is the list of all of the projects that we are aware of that are being considered for applications in Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and the MPO as well. This is a just big picture map that shows the location of all the projects. I think Charlottesville's project is a little bit hard to see, but it's right there in Charlottesville. And so the first project is the bikeway improvement and intersection improvement project at Ridge McIntyre in West Main at the intersection. And Ben, I certainly don't want to steal your thunder. If you would like to talk through it, happy to let you, or I'm happy to take it from here.
You go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is not the final
I was
concept.
gonna say, this was.
Yeah, this is not the final concept. We're working on updating it. But the main the main improvements that are considered as part of this project is that there will be a two-way bikeway along the north side of West Main Street from 4th Street to the Ridge McIntyre intersection. So what's different from this concept is that the two-way bikeway is going to continue through this intersection, and it's going to continue along the south side of West Water Street to 2nd Street Southeast. So southeast, that's next to the garage, the parking garage. Water Street is going to become a one-way street going westbound, and it will use South Street as the one-way pair. And then the study will also, or the final concept is also planning to maintain the contraflow bike lane along South Street. The slip lane at the west intersection at West Main Street, this is going to be removed. The island is going to be removed. The statue pedestal will be relocated to the corner. And the center lane right here that is currently a shared through left lane will become a shared through right lane to help process the high southbound traffic volume at that intersection a little bit more effectively. And then this pedestrian crossing right here is going to be squares. This is not the final concept that was shared. It's this was the closest one that was developed as one of the alternatives for review in the first round of public engagement. But we are going to plan to take this out to the public for a second community input meeting in January to do a final vetting of the final concept.
And the difference between this and the final concept, the congestion reduction score is probably going to be a little bit better with what we got to with this.
Yeah, so that's a good example of how we considered how Smart Scale scores the project when we were considering what the final alternative should be, because Smart Scale would assume to be the funding program that this project would be submitted through. Okay. All right, so moving on to Albemarle County, the first project is a resubmission of the old trail in US 250 roundabout. Do you want to say anything about this, Albert, or do you want me to talk through it? Okay. It includes a hybrid roundabout at Old Trail, which is one of the entrances to Western Albemarle High School, and also includes improving the shared use path that would connect to the shared use path going to the school. So there'd be a shared use path as part of this project.
Where does the shared use path go?
It would connect to I think it's about right there, connect from the intersection to the existing shared use path that goes into the Henley Middle School.
Okay, that's Henley. All right.
All right, so I have some questions about this one. So right now, where the traffic circle is proposed, that's where the crossing guards are, right? So you're saying there'll be another crossing that'll be further down than the crosswalk would. Where would the crossing guards be? I guess that's what I'm saying. Because there's a lot of kids that walk the trail to school, and I'm imagine the traffic circle. One of my classmates was actually hit by a car, at that intersection is why the crosswalk exists now, one of the lights. So I'm just wondering, I know that traffic circles in general are safer for pedestrians, but I am very concerned about making sure that we don't take a situation we work really hard to make safe for kids to cross that road and make it less safe.
Yeah, there still will be crosswalks there. So I would imagine if there are crossing guards, they would be at their crosswalks.
How does it work with the crossing guard in a traffic circle?
I would have to defer to the people who the police department does that. That's beyond my ability to speak.
I would just hope that someone's asking that question when we go through here, that someone's asking specifically, how are the traffic, because how are the crossing guards going to figure out?
Well, does this design say to put rapid flashing beacons back in at the crosswalks?
There will be some sort of pedestrian control signal.
So can there be some way that it activates all the other, like letting all the other oncoming traffic know in advance of coming into the roundabout that there's people crossing on the, let's say, east side of the roundabout?
I'll make a note to find out about this. These are all questions for like traffic engineering and the police department and the schools and things like that. So I can see if we can get some answers to this question. I will say that this is a resubmission of the project from the previous round, so.
I mean, and ideally, the situation that we need long term is we need, and I know that that's not gonna, you know, funded, but I mean, really, we need a ability for like a pedestrian crossing. To go over the road.
You mean like grade separated,
Um,
like a bridge?
yes, on a bridge, yes. Ideally, that's what's needed. That's would be the safest thing, given the volume of kids that walk, this is a high volume of kids that would walk from one. Both from one school to another, but then also from Old Trail to Weston, so. That's ultimately what's needed, if there's any way to get that funded now or in the future, that's what we really need to make that so.
I'm making a note about this. What I will say though is that this would be a project that's submitted by Albemarle County, so
Sure.
it would be working with the county to determine what they want as part of the application.
Full disclosure, I have a child at Henley Middle School who walks
Sure,
every day from Henley Middle School to Western Albemarle.
yeah,
And so,
no, I understand, it's important. Right, the next set of projects is they're gonna mix some of the MPO and the Albemarle County projects together. But we wanted to show all of the projects for Barracks Road and all of the projects for the Ivy Corridor together, so you could see how if all of the projects move forward, what they would potentially look like cohesively. So the red are MPO projects that are under consideration, and the green are Albemarle County projects that are under consideration. So starting with the MPO projects, this is the extension of the eastbound 250 northbound 29 ramp extension coming off at Barracks Road. And then this would be combined with a double left turn at the intersection with Barracks Road itself. There would be sidewalk improvements from the northern interchange ramp here, connecting down to the sidewalk, the existing sidewalk in the city of Charlottesville. What I did not show that I realized later is that we were planning to also do the sidewalk on the other side of Barracks Road as well, between the interchange ramp. And then for the project that the county is considering, there would be a right turn lane from Barracks Road southbound to the on-ramp on US 250 westbound. And then they would close the median crossover at Ricky Road, and then there would be a sidewalk or shared use path if we can fit it in within the right of way between Bennington and the on-ramp.
What's the width of the east project sidewalk?
The east project sidewalk, that one right here.
Yeah.
I'm imagining it would be 5 feet plus the buffer. But I'd have to verify.
When you say, Sandy, is VDOT standards that a 5-foot sidewalk needs a buffer?
That's a good point. It may not need a buffer.
Okay.
But I don't know that there's a lot of extra width to go beyond the minimum requirement.
And when you just mentioned, you mentioned something that so you mentioned something about it's not shown on the map, but the project would include some sort of sidewalk connection on the, I'm going to call it the northbound side of Barracks Road between the on-ramps.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, right here.
So there is a sidewalk there. Are you talking about just making that compliant?
Improve it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Or make sure that connection goes all the way through.
Yeah, I think it does. It's more that it's not compliant.
Yeah.
It's like it's at the ramps and such.
Well, and we would probably have to do that anyway because we're connecting it to the.
so I know we talked about this at length the last time, but so I did walk out there with the county staff and look at this intersection. And there are two things that we're sort of talking that occurred to us when we're looking at that is one, is there a way is there a way for that sidewalk that's going underneath the bridge to be multimodal and not just strictly a pedestrian sidewalk? I think the answer is no.
Correct.
Okay, so that being the case, has anyone considered maybe instead of having sidewalks on both sides, to actually have something that is multimodal on one side, and then make sure that we have crosswalks on both sides so that people can do this maneuver and go across. Because while we were sitting there, we saw multiple bicycles going through there just in the few minutes we were there. We saw, multiple and scooters and other things.
But I think it's the buses, right? Like if you don't have a sidewalk on the other side, how are people gonna access those bus stops?
You'd still walk. You'd have the side, but you'd have a crosswalk, so it would be a little bit of a weird maneuver. So you'd walk down, you'd cross the road, you'd go under, and then you'd cross again. But that would allow for everyone to go under as opposed to, just one group of people.
So.
I
keep
see.
In mind that in the county,
You're just talking
bikes
about
can use sidewalks.
They can't.
So, I mean,
if
it's obviously less than ideal to have a narrow sidewalk under the bridge. But if it's a relatively small bottleneck and then the sidewalk widens later,
Okay,
it seems like people could probably negotiate passing under the bridge, or you can dismount under the bridge, so we're gonna do that. But it seems to me the problem with that concept here is that we're looking at 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the bridge, even where that constraint disappears. And I guess I don't understand why there isn't enough space, since surely VDOT owns all that land.
Wait, enough space where?
Not under the bridge, but all the rest of the purple.
Oh, the issue is that it has to be a logical terminus. So you can't have a sidewalk that just ends without ending at a specific location.
So can we just have a 10-foot sidewalk with a buffer that ties into an existing 5-foot sidewalk with no buffer?
I don't know the answer to that. I can ask about
I
that.
can't imagine there's a VDOT standard that says the sidewalk can't be widened and then become less wide.
Correct.
Well,
Also, I have to say, I disagree, I can't believe the logical termini thing, given the fishery concepts you guys gave us, where the shared use path ends abruptly in a interstate on-ramp, then sidewalk on the other side. Like, I don't see how you can say that that's a logical terminus and not, going to the sidewalk here.
wait, say that again, for the shared use path?
Yeah, but for the sake of it, let's just say it's not a shared use path, it's just an 8 or a 10-foot sidewalk.
10 sidewalk with a buffer.
Okay. I will find out. I will find out what the concerns about that are. I think there are multiple considerations beyond that though, because as you increase width, that also increases the impact to like the road right of way, things like that. If there are utilities, that increases the impact to the utilities. So I will find out. I will find out more information on what the impact of that would be. But it sounds like the question is to keep the sidewalk as wide as it can for until there's a bottleneck that would prevent it to narrow down. I can't guarantee that the answer is going to be like, yes, we can do that, but I will be happy.
Yeah, I mean, I won't be here when you come back, but
I'll be here. Thanks, Andy.
I going back to the concept of these are statewide projects, right? And you guys as VDOT are pushing back and saying, oh, we can't help these sidewalks or these pedestrians as part of this project, because that would have to be a district grant project because these are for statewide priorities. Like, I think what's happening here is we're doing a highway expansion for a statewide priority, and we're potentially making the situation worse for bikes and pedestrians. We're creating an impact as a result of this project. And what we're asking you is for these pedestrian improvements, bike and pedestrian improvements, in order to mitigate that impact that this project is creating. So it's very much a part of this project in particular, because that, triple lane, high turning, curb radius, crosswalk there is gonna be dangerous, compared to what's there now. Like, I mean, we're doing a highway expansion, right? So we should be including mitigations for bikes and pedestrians as part of that.
Right. To the extent that we're able to, we're trying to do that with you all. I want you to hear that. We're trying to be a partner with you all. We're also trying to manage the smart scale process.
But there's nothing there, right?
On the south side, there is not, correct.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's only more dangerous. No, there
Any other questions on this one? All right, so this gets into the Ivy Road improvements. So this is the set of projects that were identified that are being considered right now by Albemarle County and the MPO. There's a set of 2 roundabouts, one at US 250 in Forest Head, one at US 250 in Canterbury Road. I also want to point out that traffic engineering has done some pavement. They just repainted the pavement at the off ramp from 250, the off ramp at Old Ivy Road, to add a left turn lane to help move the left turning vehicles away from the vehicles that are trying to go through the intersection there. So the 2 projects, the 2 ramp improvements that the MPO is eligible to submit would be an off-ramp extension at Old Ivy Road, and then an on-ramp extension from Old Ivy Road onto the bypass, and this would tie into Leonard's Bridge. I think we talked about this one at length, but these are planning level concepts. So this is not necessarily what the footprint of the roundabout would be or what the roundabout would look like, but it can give you an indication of how it might impact some of the area around it. That's the one at Canterbury Road. This is the one at Forest Head.
So one thing that's always bothered me about that, and I guess is really like for Albemarle County, but somebody who grew up on Owensville Road, it's amazed me that you got traffic lights and other things like Forest Head and Farmington, and yeah, Owensville Road, I think has much more higher volume of traffic coming out of Owensville Road on 250, doesn't even have so much as a stoplight. And so it always felt to me like a wealth thing, like, that because of people in Farmington and Forest Head had more money, that they got traffic circle with some roundabouts, but Owensville never did. But let's just leave it there.
I think Chuck would certainly know this off the top of his head. I mean, I think there was a corridor study that might have addressed that from maybe 8 years ago or so. I'll go back and see if I can find recommendations from that.
Yeah, I'd love to know what the plan is for Owensville, because that's a disaster right there.
And those are the ramps. Okay, so we talked about 250 a little bit, and we talked about the Fifth Street DDI a little bit, and I want to spend just a minute going through this because I think there's a lot of desire to do a full multimodal connection across this street, and we certainly would like to do that as well. We're left in a situation where we have a lot of constraints on this project, so figuring out how to move forward is challenging on this one. Most of you were here for round 6, but we submitted the DDI previously as part of the round 6 slate of applications, and it included the full shared use path down the median on Fifth Street. What happened at that point is that our bridge section determined that the bridge could not accommodate the shared use path without the bridge having to be reconstructed. And so the cost of reconstructing the bridge ended up being accounted for as part of the cost estimate for that smart scale application. The cost of that project was about $79 million. So when we looked at the benefit score, which was 16.9 benefit score, and looked at the lowest scoring high priority project from round 6, we found that in order for the benefit cost ratio to have been high enough to have been funded in round 6, the bridge could have cost no more than $42.7 million. So every round is different because projects are compared against the other projects that are submitted as part of that round. So we don't know exactly what the comparisons are going to be for round 7, but $42.7 million gives us a little bit of a frame of reference for where this project would have needed to land in order to be as successful. The average cost of high priority project funded in round 6 was $27.2 million, and the highest cost project that was funded through round 6 was just under $46 million. So again, that just helps us identify where we're trying to keep the costs below in order for this project to be viable as a smart scale project.
Sandy,
Yeah.
do you know how much money will be available for the HPP pots for smart scale round 7?
I think our best guess is that it's going to be similar to this round, which is about, it's a little bit below 500 million, it might have been closer to 400 million. Yeah. So our goal as part of the pipeline study was to value engineer the previously submitted concept and to come up with a concept that would be a little bit more viable for a smart scale. So what this project is intended to do is to get the DDI funded and provide connections to the bridge itself. Connecting it to the Fifth Street Hub and Trails project that was previously funded. So there would be a connection to that shared use path. The connection to the shared use path would connect to the sidewalk that's currently on the bridge. If we are able to widen the sidewalk on the bridge itself, we certainly want to do that. And then it would connect to the south to the existing sidewalk that ends basically at the intersection across from Pinehurst Court. So it would provide the pedestrian connectivity. It would help with the traffic backups along the interchange that is occurring at this intersection. We understand the desire to also accommodate bicyclists throughout this project area. Our concern is that if we start trying to add some of these shared use paths as part of the project application, that we're going to start getting outside of this $42.7 million range. So this is the needle that we're trying to thread as part of this application that goes into like one application package for the MPO to submit. If there is interest from the localities participating, there could be some opportunities to leverage funding to try to get more into the scope of the project without negatively impacting the score, but that would be a different discussion. So questions on this one?
Couple things. So, well, first, you agree that that's a shared use path going right into a sidewalk, right?
That it's a shared use path going right into the sidewalk.
So logically, there's no, like, the only terminus of that shared use path is the 5-foot sidewalk.
Is the 5-foot sidewalk.
So I guess my big question is, can we widen that sidewalk?
I don't know the answer to that. It's going to be dependent on what the bridge department says. We're going to have that conversation with them.
Okay, because like last time, the problem with the bridge not being able to accommodate the SP was that there's a longitudinal joint down the middle, right? It wasn't like the weight of things.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that was part of it. It was a longitudinal joint. There are also some considerations for drainage. We can't impact the drainage of the bridge, so that's the other big consideration. And then the other issue is how any additional concrete is actually affixed to the bridge itself. So there are a couple of things that we would need to have.
I think 8 feet as an absolute minimum with a decent barrier on the side, probably like a Jersey barrier, if you don't have a buffer, would probably accommodate bicyclists. It wouldn't be comfortable. 10 feet would certainly be better. I guess my only follow-up question then is, when will we know? Hopefully not after we've decided to submit the project and cost estimates come back in and they tell us.
A lot of the concept development is outside of my control. So, I mean, we can have these conversations as soon as possible, but it's dependent on the ability of the other departments to, do the work to give us the answers.
Okay. And so the concept as it is now does not include any sidewalk light.
It doesn't preclude it. This is very high level conceptual. So it's to give you an indication of what we're trying to do. It's not like, a concept plan that would move forward to conceptual design.
So the one thing that does concern me a little bit, and I'd be, and I don't, Peter may feel back up on this, I don't know, or not. Because Route 76 is completely dysfunctional. I think a lot of people, it seems to me that people are taking another route that then goes, up through this street. And so when you look at like a straw now, you look at the number of cyclists that run through that corridor, it's actually quite significant. And so if we're severing, we've already made 76 useless through our area. And if we're doing anything that would disrupt bicycle traffic in that area, that'd be a big problem. So I mean, I don't know if you're considering that we put in, if you know, your application, and talking about that, about the, you know, you're talking about national significance, you know, and regional significance, the fact that, you know, this is a route that's going to be about people going not only through counties, but through the country. But is that a fair statement?
Yeah, but I think the regional question is much more significant. So Albemarle's first great deal of redevelopment, we've been talking about it for decades. Is happening and hitting on Fifth Street. So there's gonna be a lot of settlement right south of 64 in the county. So although there is a national significance, though, it's a highly, and I mean, this is almost the closest place someone could live anywhere in Albemarle County to downtown. And rightly, it's being much more intensively developed. And so, yes, I think that's true, but there are a whole lot of reasons for that heat map to be hot, not just the national trips.
I think I had more of a process questions maybe for PJPDC staff. What you're asking us today is should you keep working on these things, right? Not do you have all the answers to all our questions, but should you keep working on this?
Yes, are you generally supportive of moving these projects forward?
Yeah, and I think with this one, we all want something out of the one. We have some very clear design questions that we have. It seems like the answer would need to be yes for us to continue answering those questions for this one specifically, right?
The answer would be yes to move this forward?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But there's another point at which you come back and say, we want to submit this as an application.
Right, we're not asking for a resolution of support for the applications themselves right now.
I think the feedback I would give, and I won't be here to make a recommendation, and I'm certainly not the decision maker, is that this is a project that is on the verge of being extremely useful for connectivity in this area, and also on the verge of being entirely car centric and further cutting off one of the largest growth areas in the county. And if you don't lean into getting that last little bit of like that connectivity, which is getting across 64, that's always obviously the hardest part, then you know, this is on the verge of a project that I would recommend council that we not pursue.
The one thing I say, we understand that. I want you to hear that. We understand that. The challenge is that we may not be able to do everything with one application. And we may not be able to do everything through Smart Scale. And that's where we're a little bit stuck right here, right? Because if we try to do everything with one application through Smart Scale, we're going to get to a point where we're beyond the ability for this project to get funded.
So I hear that, Sandy, and I think I could be wrong, but what I'm thinking is if we say, cool, let's move forward with Smart Scale on this project, remove some of the bike ped facilities because they're going to cost, you know, too much, and we'll worry about that stuff later in some other project, the likelihood of like those projects getting funded and, you know, Smart Scale or perhaps any other state funding is unlikely. I mean, we just saw how hard it is to like get those type of like projects funded, especially since land use is only a multiplier now.
Yeah, so I think what you may be getting at, which is if you're going to come back after doing the continued application development on this, and you have to say, you know, we've got to cut the bike ped stuff out. I think we'll also need to hear how are we going to go after funds for that bike ped stuff separate from Smart Scale. Like we need to know the answer to that as part of our application strategy, so we're not just leaving that stuff in the future.
And that's how Albemarle, Charlottesville, or CJPDC can go after those funds, not how VDOT.
Yeah, and I guess
Is there another either discretionary grant program, reconnecting community? Is there something else that can support parallel bike ped infrastructure? The challenge I think we're going to see is there's no guarantees of that being awarded because it's all competitive, and there's now a required local match in all of those types of grants where Smart Scale does not require that. So it's also going to be a funding question.
Yeah, and I think we need to know what that looks like on that, so we can make those decisions on what our priorities are for this.
The real challenge as it runs is not even funding, right? It's that Albemarle
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up.
Project and doesn't want to do eminent domain ever for those.
Right.
So. But I was like, if you give me a 10-foot sidewalk on that bridge, I will be thrilled about this project. Like,
Don't know that 10 feet is going to be doable.
With buffer. I don't know if he's thrilled though. I do have another process question, and I feel like I missed an email or something. The recent survey that looked at, all these other projects in this area. What was that about? Like, why were we asking about, what were we trying to gain about the feedback about asking about all these other additional projects? Like, just to say, are people supportive of these things? And then you would take those to decide how to potentially implement those projects for the future, knowing that we probably aren't going to be able to build the bike pit stuff in this project.
That was specifically requested by Albemarle County.
Right.
To get feedback.
I kind of assumed that, but I guess why?
Well, because there's interest in knowing which of these projects to move forward with if there's an opportunity to move forward with any of them. How do we prioritize among these different projects that provide different types of connections for different groups of people?
Okay. Cool.
Andy, before you, Chair, if I may, point something out, so yes, it would be good to use a sidewalk as a bare style shared use path. But the existing sidewalk is not adequate as sidewalk today. Well, it has a below hip level rail where even being startled, you could plummet down to the highway below. So I think it would be a not small question to know how much sidewalk you can have just for the sidewalk piece of this, let alone the shared use path. Well, good question for the bridge part.
Understood. Any other discussion on this one? All right. I want to spend just a second going through the history of 118 because there are folks in this room who probably haven't been here since 2011 when discussions on this whole area started. There were some studies that were done starting in 2011 and 2013 looking at the 118 interchange and at traffic on Fontaine. And at that point, the concerns that were identified as part of these studies were traffic backing up on westbound Fontaine, going to the 29 bypass interchange, weaving on 29 northbound between the 64 westbound off ramp and then the Fontaine on ramp, weaving on I-64 eastbound between the two loop ramps right here, and then weaving on 29 southbound between the two loop ramps right here. And then also safety concerns about the 29 northbound left turning traffic. I say all this because when we put the survey out and we haven't finished vetting it, so I'm not prepared to share results from the survey today, is there were a lot of questions about why can't we go back and rebuild the interchange, and this gives us a little bit of a history of how we got to where we are today. So these were the concerns that were originally identified in the set of 2011 and 2013 studies. And so when the study was done and the recommendations were developed, what the recommended improvement was this braided diverging diamond interchange. This included grade separations, so the diverging segments wouldn't be controlled by lights, but they would be grade separated so they could be free freedom movements. It was submitted in the first round of SMART scale with an estimated cost of $146 million and basically functionally got a SMART scale score of 0. So it was not funded in SMART scale. So what happened is that the folks at VDOT started pulling apart the different issues individually and seeing what we could do to address these concerns one at a time. So one of the ways to eliminate both the weaving concerns on 64 eastbound and on 29 southbound is to eliminate this loop ramp right here. So the concept was developed to have the 29 southbound traffic stop at a traffic light, turn left to get onto 64 eastbound, and then put in double left turn lanes. This was submitted in Smart Scale Round 2. The funding amount requested was just under $6.8 million. It was not funded. During that same year, however, there was a scaled back concept that was submitted through the Highway Safety Improvement Program. It was submitted later that same year. It involved a single left turn lane, but similarly removing the loop ramp and having that traffic from 29 southbound to 64 eastbound turn left at the light. This project was funded at a cost of $1.3 million. We were able to address the weaving issues on 64 eastbound and 29 southbound. At that point, though, it was identified that this left turn at the intersection was going to be a shorter term alternative. It worked in the current scenario at some point before the future year scenario would break down. I do want to mention, though, that while this was the concept that was submitted and was funded, this is the concept that was actually constructed with the double left turn lanes.
So it does have double.
It does have double lefts, yeah. All right, so that addressed the weaving on 29 southbound and addressed the weaving on 64 eastbound. To address the weaving between the 64 off-ramp and the exit onto Fontaine, there was this ramp improvement project that was submitted in Smart Scale Round 2, submitted for, the cost was $2.9 million, and it was funded. So they were able to address that weaving with a $2.9 million project. We still haven't addressed the lefts from 29 northbound onto 64 westbound, or the backups that are occurring on Fontaine, especially with some of the additional development that was being planned at Fontaine Research Park. So in Smart Scale Round 3, the for diverging diamond at Fontaine was developed. The total funding request was $21.9 million. Got a pretty good benefit score, but it wasn't funded. And so then in Smart Scale Round 4, we had a revised concept that was submitted for this displaced left turn. That was $12.4 million, and this was funded. Now, a lot of you all are aware there was some discussion after this project was funded to revise the concept. What I want to point out, though, is that the project that was ultimately funded was $12.4 million. And it addressed the safety and operational concerns for the 29 northbound to 64 westbound movement and the operational concerns at Fontaine Avenue. So what happened is that through this series of smaller projects, this is what we were able to get funded at a level of $16.6 million, not accounting for post-award cost adjustments, compared to the original concept, which was $144 million. But we still have this outstanding concern to address those 29 southbound to 64 eastbound movements that was introduced in an effort to resolve the other original concepts that were funded. And so what we see here is that some alternatives that were identified that could help eliminate some of the problems that we're seeing at that 29 southbound movement to get onto 64 eastbound. So this is a median U-turn where the traffic goes further south past the ramp to get onto I-64 eastbound. And there would be a median U-turn to allow those vehicles to make a U-turn at a light further down 29 south and then come back up to access the ramp. There's this improvement which would just moderately move the intersection south a little bit to increase the storage capacity of the existing left turn lamps. And then there was this concept down here that would basically reverse the ramps where there was a stop control. So instead of having the 29 southbound traffic stop to make a left turn onto 64 eastbound, you would have 64 eastbound traffic coming off the ramp stop to turn on to 29 northbound. We have not processed the results from the survey yet. We will be doing that and then having a meeting with the study work group to see what direction they want to move forward with. But these were options that we were considering as part of that larger slate of projects that have already been implemented to address the overall concern. Again, we're not asking for your recommendation on any one of these projects specifically at this time, just generally asking if there's consensus to continue moving forward.
And you go through the process, did the survey, right? So. And it was a little hard to take because there wasn't a whole lot of modeling, like what's the actual benefit for needs. I didn't know if you set one up as a straw man to push us towards other ones. You know, there was some manipulation going on. But anyway, what's your process for developing a solution?
The process will be we'll have the public survey with the study work group, and then we'll also look at the future build scenarios. And once we determine those growth rates,
Get that developed plan for like older people.
yeah, we'll determine those are we already have information on those, but basically we'll look at what the future growth rates are and apply those to the project improvements, make sure the improvements will function adequately based on what the future projected traffic volumes will see. And work with the study work group on a recommendation, and then it will come back before this committee and ultimately the policy board to determine if there's support to submit the application. Any other questions?
I guess this was built in the 1970s-ish, this interchange. And obviously there's a lot of stuff that's not standard today. Is there any way, I know this is FSW made well, is there any way to use some of that old infrastructure or stay with some of those old standards if it's infeasible to reconstruct it because of the price or whatever? Is there any way we can just make it less than what we have to build today?
I think if we're reconstructing it, so we can use the current infrastructure as it is now, but we wouldn't be able to reduce the standards for anything we reconstruct.
Yeah. Okay. Just seems like, I thought about this for like a lot of stuff, like all the 250 things. I'm like, that was built in 1955, and they were like, we're gonna have 8,000 cars here a day forever, and now we don't. So it's, I just don't know how we do this one. It's
a tough one.
It doesn't seem like any of these are great.
I think we should put a roundabout.
So it's in your mind, there's an improvement to the park and ride.
Yes, it would include an improvement to the park and ride. We don't really have a concept sketch for that, but there's a sort of an unofficial park and ride right here along Teal Lane. And we would make that an official park and ride that is paved, and I don't know what the capacity would be, but the intention would be to potentially, if there was in the future, for example, interest in having a transit stop located there, would be able to accommodate.
I know that in the development it was proposed across the street, they were proposing a crosswalk across 29, and a lot of us sort of scoffed at the connectivity of the crosswalk that has been known that spot.
And the county does have an option to get a connection from Teal Lane to Redfields.
Yeah, there's right away that exists left around there.
There would be if you exercise your option.
Yes.
Until next September.
No.
Sandy, in that left photo, how does the length of the turn lane where the U-turn is, how does the length of that compare to what exists now? Because one of the major issues is that people are stopped into the through traffic way back.
Yeah.
Way back. Like people are flying 60 miles an hour and coming upon stopped traffic. So how long is that compared to what exists?
So it would be, let's see, like what's there now, I think is maybe 500 feet. 500 feet, something like that, 400, 500 feet. So it looks like it would at least triple it.
Triple.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that traffic goes way past this interchange
It can sometimes.
at peak times.
Yeah.
It can sometimes. I think the question is how much of that is like people waiting to turn left that are blocking the other traffic. And then that's mixed with people who are just stuck there trying to go through that can't because they're getting blocked. So, but that's one of the things that we would have to assess in the next round to do the operational analysis.
Good point.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Is there expectation for when we're gonna have more detailed concepts or analysis done?
Well, I think we would probably, the study work group, I don't think they'll meet in December, so we're probably looking at January for the study work group, and then we can start narrowing it down. It's also possible for this one, especially that maybe there's, maybe one of the preferred alternatives is not any one of these explicitly, but is some sort of variation or modification to one of these that was moved forward.
So we're like larger metropolitan areas, like we look around like Richmond and so forth, where they do have some very significant projects going on. How are those funded?
They have to have a transportation authority. So they're raising local and regional revenue that they are using to leverage smart scale funding, or in some cases, like Northern Virginia, in some cases, may have improvements that they're just doing out of pocket.
Thanks.
Then occasionally General Assembly still just funds things, right? Like the I-64 gap. That was a General Assembly.
There's a separate fund for like interstate operations and enhancement projects. So there's a bigger funding program, but it would have to be a high priority interstate need to qualify for some of those. And then the CTV also is able to submit projects through Smart Scale, and so sometimes they submit larger projects to combine Smart Scale funding with other funding sources for major improvements. Other questions? Do you want me to turn it over to you all?
Sure, thanks, Sandy. So what was included in the packet was a staff memo that really just recapped the projects that are currently under consideration. The only note that we have on those, so the MPO has 4 application slots that we can submit for final applications. At the point of pre-application in March, however, we can submit up to 5, just in case one of those 4 were to screen out for eligibility or readiness issues at that point. And so staff would recommend that we submit all 5 of the projects under consideration, but we will be asked to prioritize so that if all 4 of them end up going in, what's the 5th one that we would want to pull out of there for evaluation? And so we proposed in the staff memo that the US 29 northbound and 250 eastbound on-ramp would be submitted as that 5th application slot, so the lowest priority. But since we sent out the packet, staff have learned more about the significant operational issues that are actually present at the 29 southbound and 250 westbound off-ramp extension, even though that has a lower V-Trans need. And so we would recommend swapping those 2 from what's in the staff memo and submitting up to our application limits in that order.
Do that last part for us. What the recommendation is, so we're saying that
Can you show that memo?
Yeah. Revised.
Are we saying that the old ID ones are our lowest priorities?
No, what we're saying is, and let me see if I can get it up on the screen. Give me 1 second. Hey, Gorion, do you already have that pulled up? Or a packet that we can zoom into?
I am not. Are you asking for the project locations and?
No, just to pull up the staff memo. But to repeat what I was saying, Ben, and so we would submit, we have 5 project locations that are currently under consideration right now for the MPO to submit, and we have to determine what's going to be that 5th application that we would pull out if one of those 4 our application limit slots were to screen out for readiness and eligibility. And so we were saying that the lowest priority one would be US 29 southbound, US 250 westbound off-ramp extension, but we're saying we should swap that with the 29 southbound, 250 westbound off-ramp extension instead. Yes, I'm sorry.
What was the
Use that now.
operational issue that made that change?
So the ramp was backing up further than initially realized. Like I think through the analysis that's being completed as one of the stars and pipeline studies, it was showing that the cars are actually backing up a lot further than we initially thought. And so for that southbound, westbound off ramp, even though that one has a lower V-Trans needs, it's experiencing higher operational issues. So it's a little bit confusing in terms of how projects are evaluated, but if that's the true operational need, we would be supportive of submitting that one instead of the, yeah,
There we go. So
as the 4th.
will that more significant operational issue be eventually reflected in V-Trans that gives it a higher probability of being funded in the future if we wait until it's reflected?
So the V-Trans needs for 2024, 2025 were just released, but they aren't prioritized. Like they're not right now, like V-Trans 1, 2, 3. And so I'm not sure, is that another year and a half that we'd know when those needs would be updated? I'm not sure what it is that.
2019, but once it goes to smart scale, so VTrans and smart scale scores are not, they speak to each other, but they're not exactly the same. So the way you're going to get your score is based on what the actual improvement reflects in terms of the analysis of the project itself. So if the data you're showing, when you look at the specific improvement based on the project you're submitting, whichever one shows more improvement is going to have the higher score at that.
And so Ben, you talked through with Sandy a little bit already about like what the question is here for today. And so the question is, are we supportive of continuing to move forward to develop these for submission in March? And I recognize it sounds like the consensus of the group is we really want to figure out some of these answers to the questions about, the width of the sidewalk. Is it possible to do certain changes? And so certainly we'd be bringing these back to you before staff actually submitted them in March for consideration.
I think that we've said that about most of the projects, that we have questions about how they would perform, no concerns that we have going forward. I don't think we have those questions about Old Ivan because we don't really have multi-level concerns that are being addressed there. So that's the only one I have a real question mark on, is the two at Old Ivy. Is that something that we want to develop? That seemed to be the point where we were not finding consensus last time we talked about this. Some of the other ones that maybe are going after that strategy of going after congestion needs and safety needs that are identified for smart scale so that we can leverage them to get multimodal investments. It seems like the other projects all have some of that could be developed further, but these two don't necessarily. So I don't want to put that out for discussion of how to deal with that. Are we okay with that? Do we want to keep moving forward with these and seeing if there's other opportunities to improve them? Opening that question up to everybody else here. Answering that themselves.
Yeah, so these are just pure highway widenings, right?
Extension data, ramps.
Ramp extensions, it's a highway widening. Connecting two ramps to make it a 3-lane on the northbound side. I mean, it's not gonna help much, it'll just fill up again. That's sort of one thing we have learned in traffic planning at this point, hopefully in 2025. C-Speed's probably gonna be moved because 2964 feels like it won't be fully baked in time. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, how do you feel about the project setting for 2964?
2964. I think we can have a smart scale application ready for it. I think the question is going to be just is there support for one of the improvements to move forward.
Do you think that would require compressing the study time frame in a way that sort of makes that decision more rushed?
I mean, not beyond what it was originally planned to be yet. I think we're on track for the study schedule. And the study schedule was scoped specifically to be ready for smart scale.
Okay.
So the one that we're saying that out of the two old IDs that we would want to prioritize would be the top ramp, right? That would be our fourth. We decided to move forward with it. Is it possible to just pair that with the existing county roundabout location at Canterbury? They're both sort of that's sort of that area. Is this project going to have more utility if you pair it with that?
I mean, they would certainly both work together. I think the challenge with that is that it would make them, you'd have one project that would a higher cost, which would potentially make it harder to fund.
Are these?
But I don't know that there's a reason that you couldn't add
I'm just thinking there's gotta be some congestion score that we're getting out as a roundabout that probably taking into account this. Some of the congestion that's on the off ramp that we're talking about improving at the same time. Can we combine those efforts and get double the congestion from the store and maybe get that with your land use multiplier? Have one very strong application, so this one very small contentious application.
I'd be happy to get some additional thoughts on that.
And does the Canterbury Road roundabout not alleviate these queuing issues? Clearing the rest of that?
There's still a stop line at the, or stop sign, always stop, that's there, so. If it's paired with triangle helps, maybe that would alleviate some of it, but if it's still a stop sign, you're not backing up. Left turn that they just put in, that's not put in, local forces. So let's see, kind of, that might change some of the metrics, honestly, if the left turns do help with backing up.
So when queuing is backing up onto 29, is that not because it's backed up from the light at Ivy past the stop sign all the way up the ramp? Is the queuing, is the bottleneck further up ramp?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that there's the stop sign there, four-way stop right before the bridge. So depending on if you have people that are trying to turn left and they wherever it is, it's still gonna be.
On this one.
So we're just not looking at old IB and IB.
It does not sound like that's a part of this at all, because of that is not a part that can be submitted by the MPO. I understand it's not part of the high priority project. Unless we're doing like all of the recommendations from the IB pipeline project, we can include that.
You could.
Wait, what did you say we could?
The only way we could do that is if we submitted basically all of the recommendations from the IB
Oh.
pipeline projects.
Yeah.
Which would be a monster project.
Right. Right. So the thing we talked about a while back,
Right. Doesn't sound like that's part of this, so.
this is okay.
Yeah, so the county could submit that as part of that particular grant, right? Well, we could submit it if we were allowed to submit it. Right, Ivy.
I mean, a locality could submit it if they were, if a portion of the project is located in that. A locality would submit.
So I guess my main thoughts on this off-ramp extension, if we're seeing queuing in both, maybe one's a little longer than the other, we should prioritize the project that actually has activity improvements that drive people off of the highway. So barracks over Old Ivy ramp.
Anybody from Albemarle may have this question, being that it is in Albemarle?
I don't want to answer for Albemarle on that question.
Okay.
Off my head.
Bonnie, would you like to weigh in on that?
I think the good thing about the old Ivy improvements is they're pretty straightforward, not controversial. From that standpoint, I think there are more simple things that I would say deserve funding because they lack a lot of the complexities and uncertainties of the other projects.
Okay. The not slide, but. All right, so at this point, if there's no other discussion, I can take a motion to move forward with these 5 as presented by staff, or I can move forward with that.
Can you say the 5 again, just to make sure?
And the motion would be to recommend to the policy board.
To recommend to the policy board that they. I don't move forward with these items.
Are you guys not looking for a motion to prioritize or recommend priority? We are.
You can absolutely do it in that way, if that's what you want to communicate to the policy board. What the policy board wants to know is, do you all support continuing to move forward with these, having us invest time, resources to creating these applications? That's what they want to know from you all. If you all want to say it to them in the way of, and we would further like you to consider them in this order, I think that's perfectly appropriate.
To both, here are our recommendations and here are how we progress. Up for discussion, we can make the motion to do it as staff recommended, but if anybody has an alternative.
I would move that we support, moving forward on these applications.
Any second on that?
Seconded.
I agree. All right, can you call the roll and have, let's take the vote on that one?
Yep. Then Chambers,
Yes.
Rory Stolzenberg,
Aye.
Albert Corrina Plum,
Yes.
Lonnie Murray. Aye. Sandy Shackelford. Christine Jacobs.
Aye.
Jason Espy.
Aye.
Bill Palmer.
Aye.
Mead Schubert,
Abstain.
Sarah Pennington,
Yes.
Barry Herring. That's all the vote.
Motion passes, and we're gonna talk more about this for the next few months, so.
Chair, if I may, I feel kind of compelled to put the timeline out in front of folks because while we keep saying we want more information and it's going to come back to us at a further stage, there is one more meeting of MPO Tech before pre-applications are due. There is 2 more meetings of tech before final applications are due. So I think it's really important to understand come the next MPO Tech meeting will be the final, do we support this project moving forward to pre-application or not? So just want to throw that out there, that it's coming quicker than we think.
They're meeting next week.
Policy board?
Policy board's meeting next week.
I think that's correct. 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Our next meeting on this would be in February.
That's right. And then pre-applications are due March 2nd. So there is no meeting after the next one before we would have to have a commitment to submit.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's very helpful. All right, moving on to our next topic. I always enjoy performance safety targets.
Thank you, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Goran Georgievsky. I'm a regional planner at the GFDC. I'm here to talk about the performance safety targets for the year 2026. This is a federally mandated process. I'll try to be brief and focus on the data as we're a little bit out of time for the meeting. Just a little bit of history. This process was established by the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century 2012, and now it's under the bipartisan infrastructure law since 2021. These objectives or performance targets are set by the U.S. Secretary of Transportation and define the transportation safety needs across the National Transportation Safety Network. The targets filter down to the states who are tasked with adopting the targets. And finally, MPOs who are also tasked to adopting targets that will support the state targets. The primary reason why we, well, not the primary reason, but one of the key reasons we adopt performance safety targets is to be in compliance with federal funding requirements. MPOs are not held accountable for meeting those targets. That responsibility lies with the state. However, MPOs have to support the states in achieving its safety goals. Historically, this MPO has adopted alternative targets until 2023, where they adopted state targets, and then in 2024 and 2025 adopted aspirational targets, which are in line with the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, Move Safe with Courage. So state, which is VDOT, provides us with valuable data to inform our strategies. where they include a recent trend line and a long-term trend line. When we adopt performance safety targets, we focus on 5 key metrics. That's the numbers of fatalities, serious injuries, their rates, and also the number of fatalities and serious injuries for the non-motorized transportation modes. One thing I want to note is that sometimes the long-term trend line and the recent trend line will show increases in the number of fatalities and serious injuries. And while this may seem counterintuitive, it's just to show how we're using the data to inform our strategies when we adopt the safety targets. The final column or the final table represents what the MPO goal % change would be for the safety targets that they choose to adopt. So responsibility for the adoption is going to be with the MPO Policy Board, but we're asking from the MPO Technical Committee today to make a recommendation on which targets we're looking to adopt. So we have 4 options. As I said, the state provides us with some data, which is reflected here. I'll start from the right to the left. We have the targets that the state adopted. They have a decrease of 1.31% in the number of fatalities and serious injuries, and a decrease of 0.96% in the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Then we have the recent trend line, which shows a significant increase in the number of fatalities and serious injuries, their rates, and also a significant increase in the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. The recent trend line, or the long-term trend line, I'm sorry, shows an increase in the number of fatalities, but a decrease in the number of serious injuries, and a very slight increase in the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. And finally, the aspirational targets, which are, as I said, aligned with the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, which shows a 2% decrease in all numbers of fatalities, serious injuries between motorized and non-motorized modes. These targets, the aspirational targets, as I said, are in line with the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, and they're based on the commitment that the City of Charleston and Albemarle County made for the development of that plan, which is about 2% annually until 2045. The commitment was to reduce the total number of fatalities and serious injuries by half by 2045.
Sorry, Brown. So right now, our goal is to go down, but we're going up.
Well, yes, technically, yes, because these the long-term trend line and the recent trend line show actual trends, what really happened in the past year. So that's why the percentage goes up.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're focused on tackling the rates rather than having an immediate reduction on the number itself.
Okay.
But our rates are also going up, right?
Yes, but in most cases, historically, that has been the case until this year.
These aren't year-over-year increases, though. These are basically 5-year averages rolling over a year. So even if there were improvements in the recent years, if they spiked a couple of years ago, those still may be reflected.
Should this MPO Technical Committee decide to recommend the aspirational targets to the MPO Policy Board, this just shows the difference between last year and this year. So as you can see, the number stays the same, and then the fatality rate has increased slightly for the and then the number of serious injuries is increasing, and then but the rate goes down.
Is the rate just like how often it happens? Like what is the rate measuring exactly?
Yeah.
And it's VMTs are the denominator, right?
Yeah, so all these calculations are based on the VMT. For this year, I think the state is projecting about 2.51 increase in VMTs for 2026. based on their calculation for our annual rates. We're excluding the COVID years here because they show anomalies. We're thinking that for our MPO, it would probably be around 1.37% of increase. So if the VMT percentage increases, it might not necessarily impact the number, but it will definitely impact the rate. So the higher the VMT, the higher the rate is gonna be.
So do we also track these on a major improvement basis to the before and after? We make a major tracking, see whether there's an increase or decrease in fatalities and injuries.
I don't believe we're tracking in that way, like if there was an improvement somewhere and how that impacted these rates. These are just general across the MPO boundary.
And I'm not sure if they do it as part of the target setting process, but OIP, who administers the Smart Scale program, they do before and after analysis on projects after they're completed.
These are also like fatalities and injuries are pretty low frequency, so it's sort of low resolution. There was, I think this was before you joined, a like VTRC study of using cameras to sort of get near miss data to get higher resolution information. You used to compare for that, which we are rolling out at protections are out here too. Were you hearing that? Oh, yeah.
So one of the biggest questions that this MPO Technical Committee and the MPO policy have had in the past is what are we doing to kind of meet these goals? So one of the options that I wanted to talk about is the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. So as TJPDC has developed a comprehensive safety action plan, there's going to be one more round of funding available. We're anticipating the NOFA will probably be somewhere in February, March, approximately, but there's 1 billion funding available, and all applications require 20% match requirement for the county. So within this MPO, we have about 15 spot-specific locations that we could apply for, but also we could, there's a lot of systemic improvements and policies and programs that we can consider as well.
And all those 15 spots are all in urban areas, right?
Yes, all the 15 spots were identified within the MPO boundary.
All right, so you need us to give you a recommendation on which targets to set.
Yes.
All right, and the ones that we are being recommended by staff are the aspirational targets.
Yes.
Which is what we adopted last year.
Exactly.
We have been a little bit more aggressive than the trend lines in the past couple of years. So I would take a motion to recommend these targets to the policy board. Or open this up for discussion if you have any questions or comments.
I remember this conversation previous year, and it was like, let's be aspirational.
Yep.
So.
I remember it even earlier years. Let's not be aspirational.
So, yeah, never mind.
Okay.
I'll move that we recommend these targets.
Can I get a second on that?
Second.
All right, if you have, for one question, are we also recommending a VMT target?
That is not a requirement that we have to recommend, but we have to include the number of how we got to the number. So in the draft letter that we provided as part of the packet, that VMT number will be included there, but it's not necessarily a requirement for us to. But so the 5 key metrics are the number of fatalities, serious injuries, and then the rates and the non-motorized number of fatalities and serious injuries.
Okay. Yeah, it's not a metric that we're trying to set a target for. It's just a metric that you're using for our target setting, right?
I'm sorry.
We're not setting a target with that one. We're just using that as a metric that we can use for.
Exactly. Yeah, that would be the projection that this MPO.
All right. Well, I've got a first and a second on the motion. I'll go ahead and take a vote on that. All in favor of moving forward with these aspirational targets and recommending them to the policy board, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. We got targets.
Awesome.
Next up is RTP, the solution discussion.
Yeah. Thanks. So the Regional Transit Partnership was created in 2017 as a committee of the NPO to provide recommendations on transit-related matters to decision makers. In December 2024, the city and the county at a joint meeting voted to activate the Charlottesville-Albemarle Regional Transit Authority, which is the body that has elected officials on it that would have the legislative discussions and be the forum for transit decision-making for the region. So they began meeting officially earlier this year. Their first meeting, I believe, was in February. And so now we are working through the transition of sunsetting the RTP now that CARTA is activated and has elected officials appointed to it. So what's included in your packet was a letter from the commission requesting the dissolution of the RTP, an RTP MOU amendment that would officially sunset the committee that would be signed by all 6 of the signatories that signed that original MOU. And then just for your information, the CARTA MOU, so the Charlottesville-Albemarle Regional Transit Authority, the MOU between the city, county, and the PDC for the administration of that body. And so what we need on this item is a recommendation to the MPO Policy Board to sign that RTP amendment to officially formalize the sunsetting of the RTP.
Any questions on this one, or get a motion to pass that recommendation along with RTP to the MPO Policy Board?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor of moving forward with these recommendations, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Next up, moving on to informational items. Orion, based on the tip.
Yep. So we have 3 tip adjustments for this one. The first one is Charlottesville Area Transit. We had questions from Rory last meeting regarding the funding for CAT 003 project. Just wanted to say that we've worked closely with CAT and we acknowledge that there were some errors in the formulas in the Excel sheet. So we have corrected that issue on our side. The next step is to inform DRPT so they can update their STIP. The next adjustment comes from VDOT for the streetscapes project. That project has been postponed a little bit. So the funding for the Garvey bonds is extended as well. And yeah, that's right. And the final adjustment comes from by request from DRPT is for the Autism Sanctuary Incorporated. Just moving the funding from 2025 to 2026.
What is this?
For the Transportation Improvement Program adjustments.
What is that specific?
Yeah.
The Autism Sanctuary?
That is
that the
a
5310?
yeah, it's a federal 5310 project. So the Autism Sanctuary is an organization that's just outside of MPO boundaries, but because of the type of funding that they include, we had to include it in our tip document for the region. And that project is funding for them to purchase a vehicle to be able to provide services.
They're located out north, the Autism Sanctuary?
I think so.
Yeah, they're outside of the MPO boundary and yeah, it's just to purchase paratransit vehicles for them. So this project was added through an amendment in the tip in past meetings. And now we have done 2 adjustments to it. One was to correct the funding for the FTA funding that was reduced from 156,000 to 126,000, and then a new adjustment moving the entire funding to FY26 from 2025.
Okay. Any other questions on this side? Moving right along, Taylor, annual obligation report.
So the annual obligation report, a draft is included in your packet here today. It's a document that we have to post every single year publicly that shows basically an accounting of which federal funds of the projects included in our TEP were actually obligated in the previous federal fiscal year. And so it outlines in that document what those obligations were. I will say the caveat is for the transit projects. We received a list from DRPT. It only had about 3 lines in it. And that's because CAT is a direct recipient of a lot of their federal funds. And so once we have a final document, we'll bring that back to you all. Hopefully CAT can provide us with just a quick table to include for the federal funds that they had obligated for federal fiscal year 25. This has to be posted on our website by December 29th. And so it will likely be posted before that final comes back to the group, but it is shared just as informational. There's no action that's required for it.
Any questions? Great. Moving right along to CTAC.
Awesome. Brian, could you pull up the CTAC memo? Just for folks to be able to see on the screen. So since the spring, there have been ongoing discussions with CTAC and with the MPO Policy Board on the structure and the purpose of the CTAC committee. It was originally established as a committee for the long-range transportation plan, but it eventually evolved to continuing to meet even outside of those LRTP update years. We've had some challenges over time, and this purpose discussion seems to continue to come up probably every 4 or 5 years around the time after we complete an LRTP for what is CTAC actually supposed to be working on. So coming up at their next meeting in about 2 weeks, the MPO Policy Board will be taking action on the structure of CTAC. And so staff has put together a staff memo that really looks at what are the decision points of the MPO, where do we have the most impact in the deliverables that we're able to provide, and where could CTAC potentially fit in with those opportunities. And so we included 3 different scenarios just to help guide and really give the MPO Policy Board something to have discussion around as they think through their decision. And so the first scenario includes CTAC being an advisory committee for the long-range transportation plan specifically. So really taking it back to its original roots back when it was first founded to give that really dedicated and focused citizen input on the long-range transportation plan. Since that's our largest deliverable as the MPO, that's the plan that we have the most control over, and that really sets the regional vision for what we're looking for in our transportation projects and investments. The second scenario is CTAC as outreach and educational support for the MPO. We identified a handful of items that are actual deliverables that the MPO has within our purview once again, and that would be the public participation plan CTAC would provide input on, the Title VI implementation plan, our annual work program, so what the MPO will be directing its resources, what projects we're going to be working on each year, still including that long-range transportation plan, and then also smart scale project submissions. This scenario specifically, these would be the items that would be brought to CTAC for action. And if they wanted to hear or have input on the more technical items like projects, they would come join an MPO Tech Committee meeting or an MPO Policy Board meeting to learn more about those activities. And then scenario 3, should the Policy Board decide that CTAC should no longer be a committee, that's also included as a scenario here as well. And so we did put these before CTAC at their last meeting last month, and they had a lot of discussion about them. There was not consensus on we would definitely want to go for one of these, but there was interest in scenario 1 and scenario 2, maybe a combination of both of those things. But they are really requesting from the policy board that they would like a little bit more time for them to be able to have more discussions and think about the activities that they could possibly want to be able to work on as a committee.
Scenario 3.
I'm sorry?
They didn't have any appetite for scenario 3.
There were comments about if we can't do, certain things that they were interested in, then why should the committee exist? And so I wouldn't say that there was, consensus from the whole group that would be something that they would want to consider, but certainly some members expressed if we can't do certain things, then why does the committee exist?
Really for discussion on our thoughts on these, or?
Well, we're really just presenting it to you all as informational to make sure that you're kept in the loop as another MPO committee, that the policy board will be taking some sort of action on this at their meeting in 2 weeks.
I think my question on one, if I can just ask my question is why have it as a standing committee if it's mostly an ad hoc committee for the update process? And would that potentially cause problems in that, like, you have people who are appointed to it and stay on it for years and years at a time? In fact, I think if you serve one term, you might not even see an LRTP. And so in practice, you're serving a decade or more. And taking someone who served here for almost a decade, that's too long to be a committee. And are you losing advantages that you might get from reconstituting the committee every time we wanted to start an LRTP and potentially change things up and get people who are actually interested at that time and not just sort of have been on the committees that feel an obligation to continue? More of a hypothetical question, don't expect an answer, but to consider.
I agree with that. I mean, the LRT process, and it's kind of quiet time and busy
Mhm.
time. What do they do during that quiet time?
Yeah,
And you said the policy board will be taking action at the next meeting. Is that action likely to just be, let's punt it until the next meeting? Or do you think there actually is there a recommendation that they'll be discussing going forward, or is it all three of these?
I think staff would be really interested in the LRTP option. Like that is really a really great opportunity for citizen input on a really big work product. But we will deliver the feedback to the policy board from what the CTAC committee has said that they do want more time. And so they could decide they want to take action that day on one of these. They could decide that they want to wait and give them more time. I think it's up to them.
at risk of now expressing an opinion, I think if you are gonna go the LRTP route and you do feel that it is worth it to have a committee that can meet
Mhm.
annually for, to talk about amendments and other things.
Mhm.
And that's actually a value and not just a way to sort of keep it on life support. I might suggest that you structure the terms of things so that you get a new ad hoc committee for an LRTP. And then that becomes the committee for the implementation of that LRTP. Then when the next LRTP comes around, you have a fully new process to appoint a new committee. Then that becomes the committee for the LRTP and so on.
It's a great suggestion.
Staff agrees with that.
Any other discussion on this one? All right. Anything else on there?
No, just making sure it's on your agenda. That we keep you guys in the loop of all those discussions.
Going back to VDOT, Sandy, do you have anything on stars or pipeline for us this time?
No, but we already talked about the update. So we wrapped up the 2 studies right before the Thanksgiving holiday. So we what we're working on now is processing through the survey responses for the pipeline studies, and we'll be convening everybody probably in January to go through the survey responses and determine what the next steps will be as far as developing a preferred alternative. And then for the STAR studies, we have met with the study work groups to start going through the preliminary alternatives that the consultant team is worked on to develop for the corridor. What we're working on with the study work group is to narrow down the preliminary alternatives to do some advanced review of alternatives that we would like to keep moving forward before we put this back out for public.
Sounds good. Corian, any updates on SS4A?
Yep, so Move Safely Blue Ridge, we're wrapping up. We have 2 reports to submit, which are the final reports for the plane itself. Those are gonna be submitted before December 15th, because I believe they're changing the submission process after December 15th, so we're trying to submit them as quick as possible. I believe we have everything we need to do so. The final quarterly report was submitted to FHWA and was approved, and then the final invoice as well. That's kind of the biggest things that have happened. Nothing new on the application through the MPO. We're still waiting and eager to hear feedback from FHWA.
Great. Any questions on that update? All right, Taylor, update on Albion management study.
The TDM study that we're working on for this fiscal year, we are still waiting on a couple pieces of data for the existing conditions report. We've had a couple more follow-up meetings, but specifically we're waiting for VO micromobility information. So we sent that request in again, and then we're waiting on complete information from parking and transportation at the university for the Wahoo Commutes program.
Next week,
Hasn't been on those emails.
No, but I can.
Hasn't you got direct access to that data? Yeah.
What's your question?
You guys have direct access to their data?
Not currently. That's something that we are working on. But they just signed a new permit like within the last 30 days, so there's some things we're working on.
Yeah, there's some reporting things that they have to explain how there's. We're hoping that they will explain how they with this very soon. So, okay.
They were in the past, right?
In the past, they were required to do huge data dumps. Were really hard for us to sort through and visualize and make sure that we had a second company set up to look at the visualization of the data. And so we're putting a lot more of that work back on MPO. Yeah.
I'll visualize them.
All right, any questions on the TDM study? All right. Next meeting, we need to take a vote on it, looks like.
Yep. So just want to mention that TGPDC is gonna undergo renovations in their office space starting January 5th, I believe. So we're suggesting that the next MPO Tech meeting, which is February 3rd, be all virtual. So we need a vote from this committee.
So
to do so.
So,
All right, all in favor of making the next meeting on February 3rd, 2026, virtual, say aye.
Aye.
Any no's? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Thank you. All right, so we will be meeting virtually in February. Session's going smoothly after that. Roundtable updates. I'm gonna start with the county. Gotcha.
Well, I was working on campaign studies right now, and then for the big one is Three Notched Trail project. There is a public meeting on December 4th at, I forget the exact.
6 p.m. Station 6:15. Western Albemarle High School
Yes. That is happening.
during BPAC.
I just scheduled it.
Field trip.
Otherwise, that's the main update we have right now.
All right. Sarah, I'm gonna turn to you for ride share.
Just a couple of quick things. We did a transit focused giveaway in September, and in November we just finished up a carpool and van pool focus. So as folks log those trips, they would be entered for the monthly drawing instead of just anybody. So we're looking forward to seeing what that translates data wise into participation. And really the big thing is as of yesterday, the DRPT grants dropped. So it is officially grant season for the next 2 months to work on getting in our operating plan for next year. So that'll be kind of our focus. And then we'll get back to fun giveaways after that.
Awesome. Indy, I think you covered a bunch of your updates.
Anything else, though?
Mitch, do you have any updates from DRPT?
Of course. Just keeping it brief, our fiscal year 26 5303 contracts have been reviewed internally and should have been distributed to all our MPOs. So, well, right now Web Grants is down, probably for the rest of the day. But once you're able to get back in, please review contracts and approve those as applicable. We held our grantee workshop just before the holiday in November. So if you need a recap on that, that's available on our YouTube channel as well. Our grant applications have opened, so between now and February 1st, please go in and apply for all your potential funding for the next state fiscal year. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or the relevant program manager for any questions on applying for any specific programming. Thank you to all our MPOs for cooperating with us on our fiscal year 27 to 30 STIP development. We're continuing to finalize our recommended projects to redistribute back out to our MPOs for consideration for the next STIP cycle in the coming months. The statewide rail plan kickoff will be held early next year. So be on the lookout for any updates on that. And if you have any questions or comments ahead of that, please let me know and I can help incorporate that into the plan. Our 2025 Chisholm Plan update is moving along quickly and should be approved by the end of this year, but comments are still available through December 5th of this week, and I can send the survey in the chat for anyone interested if they still want to provide any input on the Chisholm Plan. And that's the Coordinated Human Service Mobility Plan, for those unfamiliar. As well as FRA's NOFO for passenger rail for their federal state partnership grant program is open until January 7th. If you have any questions about that, reach out to me or our rail planner, Taylor Holden. And that is it from me.
Mitch, I think this is the last time I'll ask you this. Have you heard any news on the Virginia Breeze I-64 route?
Yes, we did have a press release just the other day in our email chain, but basically we've formally announced who our selected vendor will be. But in that process, we're still finalizing stops and routings and timings for everything.
Awesome. Do we have a vague ETA on when service might start?
Early spring, I think, is the current target, early mid-spring.
Nice. Thanks.
Yes.
All right. Do we have anybody from FHWA or?
I don't think so.
Nobody's online from FHWA or FTA.
Okay. We saw this thing you have Barry, if you have any updates, then you can phone it for. Yeah. You have any updates from Cat that you want to share? No. Okay. Chance.
Yeah, just a few things. Mike Murphy, our CEO, presented to City Council early in November. That's online. That's the good state of the union for John, right? We continue to work with PDC and PATH on future 5310 supported funding for areas not served. We're still in the process of talking about that. Applications are going to be due, as Mitch said, in February. We are in the final stages of hiring a chief operations officer. We're very excited about, and because we have a lot of operations changes coming up with demo grants for ability on demand software for ADA and green, which will probably, hopefully, fingers crossed, roll out late winter, early spring. We need to onboard these senior managers, and they come with a lot of transit experience, so we're very excited. Continue to work on marketing communications efforts. We're hiring a communications manager. We'll be interviewing 4 people tomorrow. Excited about that. It is our 50th anniversary, so this next year we're going to be rolling out different kinds of communications and marketing related. We're in the throes. Some of you have participated. We're in the middle of a rebrand, so stay tuned. Some interesting colors and logos and stuff. We have submitted to RTAP for funding, which would enable us to extend commuter bus to green. We had interviews with them, so we're shortlisted. They told us they'd hear by late November, early December, so we are right there right now. So. And that's about it.
Darn, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you. Phil, any news from you yet?
I don't think I have anything really to report. We're entering exam season, so we bus getting a lot of that, but generally things are just moving along. Yeah. Thank Rory for all his hard work on this cycle.
All right, so City of Charlottesville, few updates. We are in budget season, just like everybody else. Last week, we went before the planning commission to talk about our CIP. Last night, the city manager gave an overview of sort of the topic of transportation and what we're thinking and how we're dealing with it in our budget. There weren't a lot of hard numbers behind any of the information last night, but still a lot of good information and a lot of sort of the philosophy of what we're doing moving forward and captured in that, as well as, you know, acknowledging some of our challenges that we've run into with some of our projects and pointing out, hey, we've been successful with a lot of our projects as well. So please go back and watch that presentation from last night if you haven't. We're going to keep working through, you know, budget, but we're looking at adding more funding for sidewalks, adding more money for transit, and exactly how that goes. We have a few months to figure out. The other big update that I wanted to make sure that we all acknowledged, which Rory has brought up a few times and Bill just acknowledged, we are going to be losing a committee member. Our long-standing friend here, Rory, has been on the committee for quite a while and is rolling off, and we should acknowledge it and appreciate his work that he has done for this committee specifically. I know you've been serving on the planning commission And that's what brought you to us, but specific to the tech committee, you've done a lot of hard work here that it's really furthered us in progressing towards what we are prioritizing each vision. So thank you for all your service. And with that, I don't have any other updates. So I guess we can make a motion to adjourn by all standing up unless there are any. Peter, you're good? All right, well, go with your legs.
Vote your feet.
Yep. So I enjoyed our brief interactions.
That is